Welcome back to Year of Profit, the podcast where we talk about personal growth, financial freedom, mindset, and the habits that separate people who drift through life from those who deliberately design it. I'm your host. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room feeling completely fine, maybe even energized, and then after talking with someone for 10 or 15 minutes, you leave feeling mentally exhausted? Nothing dramatic happened. There wasn't an argument. Nobody yelled, but somehow you feel drained. Your motivation drops, your focus disappears, and suddenly the things you were excited about doing earlier in the day don't feel quite as exciting anymore. Most people assume that kind of exhaustion comes from work or stress or just being busy, but very often it comes from something much more subtle. It comes from energy drains. Last episode we talked about something called energy vampires. People and environments that quietly drain your emotional and mental energy. And judging from the response to that episode, a lot of people recognize those patterns immediately, because once you understand the concept, you start seeing it everywhere. You notice it in conversations. You notice it in social circles. You notice it online. You start realizing that not every interaction in your life is neutral. Some interactions give you energy, some take it away. And the difference between those two things can shape your entire day. But after that episode, there were 3 areas that people kept bringing up. 3 places where energy vampires seem to appear the most often: the workplace, family relationships, and the way highly successful people manage their energy. Because here's the reality. Most of us can recognize an obvious toxic person, someone who is constantly angry, constantly negative, constantly creating chaos. Those people are easy to identify, but the more difficult energy drains are the subtle ones, the everyday ones. The coworker who complains for 20 minutes every morning, the family member who constantly criticizes your decisions, the friend who only calls when there's drama, the person who seems to always pull conversations toward negativity. None of those things seem extreme in the moment, but they add up, and over time they slowly drain the mental energy that you need for the things that actually matter. Your goals, your creativity, your motivation, your progress in life. One of the things that successful people understand, often without even realizing they're doing it, is that energy is a limited resource. You don't wake up every day with unlimited emotional and mental energy. You wake up with a certain amount, and throughout the day, that energy gets spent. It gets spent on decisions, it gets spent on work, it gets spent on problem solving, it gets spent on conversations, it gets spent managing emotions, both your own and other people's. And when that energy runs out, focus disappears, discipline disappears, motivation disappears. That's when people start procrastinating. That's when they start putting things off. That's when they start feeling stuck. And a lot of people assume that means they lack discipline or drive. But often, the real issue is something else. Their energy is simply being drained faster than they realize. And sometimes it's being drained by people who aren't even aware they're doing it. Now, here's something important to understand. Most energy vampires aren't bad people. They're not villains. They're just stuck in patterns. Patterns of negativity, patterns of complaining, patterns of emotional dependence, patterns of drama. But even if those behaviors aren't intentional, they still have an impact. And if you spend enough time around those patterns, they start influencing your own mindset. Negativity spreads, pessimism spreads, stress spreads. But here's the good news. Awareness changes everything. Once you start noticing these patterns, you gain the ability to protect your energy. You can choose where your attention goes. You can choose which conversations you participate in. You can choose which environments you allow to influence your mindset. And those choices matter more than people realize. Because your environment shapes your thinking. Your thinking shapes your actions, and your actions shape your results. So in this episode, we're going to take the conversation a step deeper. We're going to talk about 3 places where energy drains show up constantly. First, the workplace. Because let's be honest, most people spend a huge percentage of their lives at work, which means the energy environment at work can have a massive effect on your mindset. Second, we're going to talk about family energy drains. And this one can be tricky because family relationships come with expectations, history, and emotional complexity. Setting boundaries with coworkers is one thing. Setting boundaries with family is something entirely different. And finally, we're going to talk about something that separates high performers from everyone else. How successful people protect their energy. Because if you look closely at highly productive, highly creative, highly successful individuals, you'll notice something interesting. They are extremely careful about where their energy goes. They limit negativity. They protect their focus. They choose their inner circles carefully, not because they think they're better than anyone else, but because they understand something most people overlook. Energy is fuel. And if you want to build something meaningful in life, you have to protect your fuel supply. Because the truth is, your goals require energy, your dreams require energy, your creativity requires energy. And if that energy is constantly being drained by things that don't deserve it, it's going to be very difficult to move forward. So today we're going to talk about how to recognize those drains, how to handle them, and how to protect the mental energy that drives success. This is Year of Profit, and today we're talking about protecting the most valuable resource you have, your energy. Last episode, we talked about energy vampires in everyday life, the subtle people and habits that quietly drain your motivation, focus, and creativity. And the response to that episode was huge, because once you start noticing energy drains, you see them everywhere. But there were 3 areas that deserved their own deeper conversation: the workplace, family relationships, and how highly successful people protect their mental energy. Because protecting your energy isn't just about feeling better. It's about protecting your focus, your goals, and your future. Segment 1. The workplace energy vampire. Workplaces are one of the most common places energy vampires live. Why? Because people are forced into proximity. You don't always get to choose your coworkers. Some common workplace energy drains. The office complainer, always talking about how terrible the job is, but never doing anything to improve their situation. The gossip loop. Office gossip feels entertaining in the moment, but it creates an environment of negativity and mistrust. The crisis creator. Every task becomes an emergency. Everything is dramatic. Everything is stressful. The credit taker. Someone who takes credit for ideas but avoids responsibility for mistakes. That behavior drains team morale fast. Successful professionals learn how to stay productive without getting pulled into workplace negativity. Segment 2. This one is the hardest for many people because of family relationships come with deep emotional expectations. You can't just avoid family the same way you might avoid a coworker. Common family energy drains include the permanent critic. No matter what you do, it's never enough. The emotional depender. Someone who expects you to constantly solve their problems. The past dweller. Someone who constantly brings up old mistakes or old family drama. Using guilt to control decisions. Examples: you never visit enough, you've changed, you think you're better than us now. Healthy boundaries with family can be uncomfortable at first, but they are often necessary for personal growth. Segment 3. How high performers protect their energy. Highly successful people often have something in common. They are extremely protective of their mental energy, not because they don't care about people, but because they understand something important. Focus is fragile. Some habits high performers use: they guard their time. They limit unnecessary meetings and draining conversations. They choose their inner circle carefully. They spend the most time around people who are positive, creative, and growth-oriented. They control their information. Diet less social media outrage, less negativity, more learning and inspiration. They schedule recovery time. Even high performers need mental resets, walks, exercise, quiet thinking time, creative space. Protecting energy isn't about avoiding life. It's about making sure your best energy goes toward what matters most. If you want to accomplish something meaningful in life, you have to protect your energy the same way you would protect your money. Because energy determines your focus, your discipline, your creativity, your resilience. And the truth is, most people aren't failing because they lack talent. They're failing because their energy is constantly being drained by things that don't deserve it. When you start protecting your energy, you start protecting your future. This is Year of Profit, and the first investment you should always protect is your energy.